Welcome to Athletic Skills Podcast, the show where we help sports coaches, S&C coaches, and PE teachers learn how they can impact their athletes' movement and physical development in a fun, practical way. I'm your host, Isaac, founder of Athletic Skills, and in today's episode, we chat to CJ, who is a tennis coach based in Dubai. CJ shares his coaching processes as a tennis coach, what movements and physical qualities he is looking for in his tennis players, and what makes a successful tennis player physically. He also shares some practical insights into what drills and exercises he likes to use and what he prioritises in his coaching when he wants to improve his players' movement and fitness. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review if you enjoy the show. Now let's get started. This podcast is brought to you by Brendan Chaplin Business Coaching. Brendan guides coaches and service-based entrepreneurs to deliver their best work, build a seven-figure lifestyle and performance business, and create a life of freedom. I started working with Brendan in September 2023, and it's been a great journey since I started working with him in launching my own business, Athletic Skills. Brendan has been fully invested in me and is a great person to chat with, to share ideas, and has vast knowledge and experiences to share also. The reason I picked to work with Brendan is that he has done it himself, launching businesses, and has a similar background to myself in S&C and wants to live a life that you want. If you want to speak to Brendan on how he can help create a life of freedom and guide you on that journey, get in touch with him by one of the methods in the show notes and DM him the word coach, and he will start the conversation. You won't regret it, and there's a good chance it might just change your life too. Hi everyone, welcome to the Athletic Skills Podcast, and glad to have CJ on with me today. So CJ, thank you very much for joining. So CJ is a tennis coach who's currently out in Dubai. So CJ, just want to talk about your background and then how that led you to where you are now in Dubai coaching tennis.
Well, a bit of background is that I played tennis as a youngster. So probably since I could hold a racket, really. I had three older brothers who all played tennis, and I then played sort of competitive tennis through the age groups, all from like under 8s to under 18s, county, national standard. And then my brother was actually a tennis coach. So when I got to 14, 15 years old, I was helping him at summer camps and things like that. And so I found a bit of a love for helping others to get better at tennis. And then when I got to around 17, I became like a hitter at David Lloyd in Cambridge, and was also working with some of the under 8s at the performance center that I was training at when I was younger, and became a hitter, and then got offered a job as a coach and snapped it up. And then 11 years later, I'm still there. So I worked there for a long time and working with players of all ages, abilities. Found a massive passion for teaching kids, mainly from the ages of 5 and 6, everything they know, if you like, and getting them to a good sort of county national standard by the time they're 9, 10 years old. And then, I just worked with captaining various teams and just found a massive passion for coaching, and now moved on from there and I'm working in Dubai, which is great.
And as you just got out in Dubai, you mentioned a month or so. So what are the differences in Dubai compared to over in Cambridge in terms of tennis? I know we spoke about this before as well.
In Dubai, the level at the moment is slightly low. The tennis system is nowhere near as developed as in the UK, where the LTA is a massive company but then in the UAE, there tends to be a lot fewer tournaments. There's not much of a ranking system. There's so much scope for development in that area. You just, in general, the players aren't quite as, I don't know, athletic, if I could say, slightly lazier, maybe. There's quite a lot of differences. There are some similarities as well.
Yeah, and that leads on nicely, I think, to what kind of success looks like in tennis. So what a successful tennis player looks like in your eyes, and then what you're picturing that youth player or that beginner to get to. So yeah.
For me, a player who's got all the full performance factors, right? So you've got physical, mental, tactical, and technical. So someone who encompasses all of those and has a combination of those. If you're not physical and not a good athlete, you're going to struggle to be a good player. If you've not got good technique, both like footwork technique and racket work, body work, you're going to struggle to make it. Same with tactics. If you've got no idea how to beat somebody, you can't problem solve, etc. And then the biggest one probably is the mental side, really. Kids who aren't confident, they go into a match situation and they get super tight and can't play like they were in training, then they're going to struggle. Yeah, a player who has the combination of all the four performance factors would be the most successful in my eyes.
Is there any one of those four areas that you see more common in terms of players that are lacking, or is it a mixture? Or
I would say technical and tactical are the easiest to develop as a tennis coach. So it's very simple to just say, here's how I want you to hit the ball, and here's where I want you to hit it. But to teach someone how to move properly and to teach them to be able to use their mind in positive ways is so hard. You've seen it all the time in kids and adults who just cannot cope with losing and can't cope with small losses, like losing a game that they shouldn't have. So I would say mental and physical are probably the biggest things that are harder to teach, but things that need to be drilled into players from the start for sure.
and then that relates. I think I was watching a game in the US Open. I think it was last week, around the one that went 5 or 6 hours. But the mental strength to keep going for that long period of time, as well as the fitness,
Yeah.
it will take a lot on the body and the mind to keep going and keep coming back from being a set down, 2 sets down, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. Such a tough format. And it leads on to, as you get tired and your fitness is not as good as the opponent, you'll find that as it gets to those fourth and fifth sets, the things that start to happen are that you mentally check out. And because you're just struggling fitness wise, you end up going for a shot that you shouldn't have done because of your fitness. So it is fascinating, really. And you can see it so quickly in players who get tired, is that they just go for a winner down the line because they don't want to be in that rally anymore. Um, and similar, a lot of sort of mental checkout as well, where people just don't want to be in the rally because they think they're going to miss and they lose the confidence and they just go for a silly drop shot or something like that. So to have that for 5 or 6 hours, to have the focus that those players have is just absolutely admirable to them.
And then we've discussed there some positives or benefits of having good fundamental movements and good fitness and athleticism from the elite level. So from the beginner point of view, so someone just starting out or youth players, why is that athleticism and that key fundamental movements important for building a strong tennis base of the four areas?
I think firstly, like to be able to develop those fundamentals, it's all about doing it without the ball. So it's at the start of each session, it's being able to do those footwork drills that they wouldn't necessarily be able to coordinate when the ball is in play. So movement as in tennis is one of the most important things because you have to learn to be efficient. And when you're moving, if you're doing too many steps, for example, you're going to get more tired and you'll find that you end up getting more off balance. So those movements that you have to learn from a young age, or even if you can still teach it to adults, it's a bit harder, are so important for the efficiency of being able to get to a ball because it's a movement sport.
So you mentioned footwork is key. So why is footwork important in tennis? You mentioned you don't have too many steps. Obviously it helps you get around the court. So what, as a coach, what are you looking for in footwork for that young player, that beginner?
Firstly, I look at is the sort of athletic base. So with the movement shapes as well. So you're looking at from their ready position, are they in a low enough base, for example? And then how's their first step to the ball? Do they open from the hip or are they just turning and then crossing over immediately? So I'm always looking at from the start. So how do they get to the ball from literally from a split step where they jump and then move? And then how do they recover back from the position after the shot? Because all depends on the ball, right? As to what movement you're going to do, how deep it is, how short it is. And you may do different stances according to what sort of ball you're hitting. So yeah, it's really important to be able to develop. Again, the warm up is a brilliant opportunity to develop this in children and keep that fun. And they won't even know that they're doing something that's going to help them in the future because they're thinking of how fun it is. But you've got to be able to teach someone to be able to do a forward pivot when they hit a shot. They've got to be able to do an outside hop. They've got to be able to do a reverse pivot. So there's a lot of stances and footworks that they have to learn when they're younger or when they're adult. But it is really important to be able to have because it leads to your balance, right?
So I was chatting to a coach who coached paddle, and we were discussing around lateral movement which is key, obviously, in tennis as well. See, we were discussing around whether you cross your feet over and when you're moving laterally or where you do more of a shuffle. Have you got, with a lot of lateral work in tennis, is there any specific technique you coach when working laterally?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think with juniors, especially like really young ones, you'll always teach side steps to start with. Because side steps the easiest way for someone to feel balanced on the court. But obviously, as the ball goes further away from them, they have to learn to be able to cross over and run. It also depends on the speed of the ball, right? So if you've got a slower ball, you're going to be able to use side steps to move to the ball a lot easier. If the ball's faster, you might have to use a quick crossover. So it really does depend on the ball. And obviously in tennis, movement is always depending on that. But my biggest advice for moving laterally is always about opening from the hip. So as soon as you split step, it's being able to open out with your hip to the direction that you're going. Yeah.
And you mentioned the warm up is a key time to develop that athleticism and that movement around the footwork. Is there any other movements that you look for in the warm up that might develop the racket work or upper body or anything else that you're looking for in your warm up that will help?
Yeah. I'll always use sort of medicine balls. It's a really nice way of doing that. Even shadow swings and warm ups as well. So it's talking about warm up is essentially doing things without the ball that you can then do in a match situation or in a training situation without thinking. And using medicine balls is a great way of being able to get the sort of torso rotation, a trunk rotation. And also shadow swings is great for that.
And I'm a big fan of medicine balls as well. I always tell coaches that you can do power, strength, balance, a lot of core work, and it's a real practical piece of equipment to use. So,
Yeah.
what sort of movements are you doing with the medicine ball that you like to use with your tennis players?
Doing like side step out and then step forwards, throw the ball and then do a forward pivot. Again, you could do all of the shots and stances using a medicine ball, which is why it's so great. I might be doing a wide forehand, for example, and getting to be a bit more explosive, where they'll do three big steps and then they'll do what's called a mogul, which is essentially on a wide ball where they move through the shot, but you can do that again whilst throwing the ball. I might do what I was talking about earlier, the sort of reverse pivots, where it's a bit more of a defensive movement, where they learn to move backwards and then throw the ball whilst reversing back, even jumping back as well. I'll do serve work as well with it. So you'll get them to do overarm throws and see if you can get some good distance on the overarm throw. But the whole idea is just to make them a lot stronger so that when they put the racket in their hands, they feel like this is light and I can now swing much stronger. Similar with using the bungees. You've used like bungees before. Yeah. So pulling players out towards their forehand and they've got to resist it. And then when they actually move out to their forehand, they're going to feel super light. And you can do the same thing with recovery as well. But yeah, medicine ball is great for that.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you're using quite light medicine balls for those, maybe 2 or 4 kilograms when you throw it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes even 1 kg with the kids and even not even a weight, just using like a plastic ball or something, just to get them to feel like they're holding something that they can do the movement with. But yeah, I wouldn't go any heavier than 3 kg really for tennis.
And then how long would your warm normally last for? Just curious with everything that you do.
A good 10, 15 minutes. If I had a 90-minute session, I might even do a bit longer, something like 20 minutes. But always trying to go through the system of pulse raiser, get the blood pumping, and then go into some more dynamic movements like lunges and squats and things. And then I might go a bit more sort of tennis specific and do some medicine ball work with them, some shadow swings before going into the normal tennis warm up with the racket.
And it just shows that I was talking to another coach the other week, and the warm-ups have changed completely now from a few years ago, where it was just a lap around the court or a lap around the pitch and a few touching the toes and things. And then now it's more specific to the actual sport and can get a lot out of the warm-up as well in terms of development and use that time to actually develop the player as well.
And I think that leads nicely into why the longevity of sports players has become so much. Like people are going into their late 30s to play tennis, for example. Or was it Boris Becker or Bjorn Borg finished when he was about 28? And was that due to warm up? Probably not. But it just increases the longevity in the sport. Tennis is a bit more, I don't know if you've seen like activation bands. So there's a lot more of that nowadays. A lot more of firing off the muscles to start with. with activations, mainly sort of shoulders and glutes in tennis. But you do definitely see that a lot more now, which is great to see.
No, and is that around coming from the elite players that are bringing that into now the grassroots game? Would you say they're using them as role models to show that fitness is important, or is it coming from coaches or from the national boards?
I think a mixture of both, really. So seeing what it's like with kids, it's like, oh, what? See Djokovic do it, and I'm going to start doing that now. And yeah, I think it's coming from a mixture, to be honest. But coaches are the main reason as to why players will then become in a certain routine. So you've just got to be super diligent with explaining the reasons for why warming up is good, especially to kids, and especially to ones who just want to turn up and hit. You have to say, put your racket down. Come on, we've got to do the warm up. But you just got to make them buy into it a little bit, and then also keep it super fun and very competitive almost, because then they actually look forward to doing it. And again, it's like, I'm doing it because it's fun rather than I'm doing it because I need to. And then it becomes a habit when they're 10, 11 years old. But I see it so much more now that the kids are warming up, which is great to see.
Is that the same around when you're trying to develop the players physically in the fitness in terms of getting their buy-in, using education and explaining the importance of athleticism as well in terms of those four areas that you mentioned? So if you're getting a kid that's pushing back on fitness and just want to hit balls all the time, so just using that buy-in, using that education to get their buy-in.
Yeah, for sure. And the key is to just keep it fun and do things in the warm up where it's going to massively help their tennis footwork, for example, or their strength, but they're not necessarily thinking that's what they're doing. They're just doing, I don't know, for example, I do a star drill where I get kids to put like 5 balls out on they're dotted around, and they have a racket and they've got to run and get a ball and then run back, put it on the racket. And they might be doing it against a team the other end, and it's a bit of a race and it's fun. But actually what I'm developing is their agility and their speed around the court. Yeah. And that sort of thing is what will help kids develop those things without really, knowing they're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's disguising things into it, and it makes the session go quickly as well if they're having fun as well and more engaged
Yeah.
and
Just
learning more as well. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your coaching. So let's say you've got a one-to-one beginner and then you've got them for a 90 minutes, let's say. What are you looking for as a coach to start off with in terms of their movement and their athleticism? And then where might you go from there as a coach?
yeah, I like to start by looking at, do they have a bounce about them? Do they have that sharpness about their footwork where they've got a bit of a bounce? Because that then leads to having a much better first step. So I'll always look at the athleticism of their first step to the ball, and then I'll be looking at, do they have a lower base? So that, are they able to push off from a wider lower base? And then the thing about tennis is, if it's beginner, for example, they're so focused on the ball, that's all they're really thinking about. And as soon as you put their feet involved, get their feet involved, they lose coordination. So it is good to slow things down with the ball and do things like hand feeding, where I'll get them to sidestep out and then step in to do good footwork, but I'll do it with a hand feed where it's very slow and much easier for them to be able to do it. Other things I'm looking at is, do they do a split step? Are they moving from a small jump? Because that will allow them to then change direction. Do they naturally recover back to position after they've moved to the ball? Or do they just stay where they are? And do they complete the shot with the movement in terms? But it's definitely difficult with beginners because of they're always focusing on the racket work.
See, you're always looking at the feet first and looking at how that works before you even looking at the racket work after that. So looking at more footwork and
It's good to do that, because most of the time it is to do with their position as to why they can't hit the ball. And someone could have the best technique in the world, but if they can't move and get into position, then that technique's not great, right? So you have to teach them to move and then develop the technique a little bit more after that, because once they're in the better position, then their technique will be maximized, if you like, because they're in the perfect position to hit the ball.
no, and then so you mentioned around the footwork and you mentioned how you might go about that on court. Is there any other drills or techniques that you look for when you might go in if you've got enough time or players want to work with you within the gym as well? Have you got any other exercise that you might look to work on in terms of footwork?
Yeah, I tend to, so going into the gym is much more of a high performance sort of area where for example, our scholarship kids that we have now, they might ask to do 2 hours in the gym and 4 hours on court fitness. Where so the sort of differences there are that in the gym, I tend to work more on pure strength. So you might do pull ups and tricep dips, for example, to work on strength. And then adding weights to things. It might do some squats where we're adding weights just to build that pure strength. And then other sort of things in the gym, we might do a sort of plyometric work. So increasing the power. So we might do a squat for a couple of reps and then jump on a box, for example, and turn that strength that they developed into a bit of power. On court stuff tends to be a bit more technical with the footwork. So we'll be doing maybe the bungee that I was talking about with you, or medicine ball work, or we might be working on split and hit, which is something that I've been doing recently where you get players to go from their ready position and then make a stamping sound out to the side. That's one I learned from a very good physical trainer for tennis. And that's a really great way of being able to develop that power in the first step. But yeah, in the gym, it tends to be a bit more sort of gym based, getting stronger. I might do cardio in the gym as well, interval training on the running machine. We might do cycling, but super fast, explosive work, because that's really important in tennis. But then also you've got that sort of overriding stamina that needs to happen for those long 5-6 hour matches that we were talking about, where you might get players to go and do the 5-10K run at a slower pace, see if they can just keep going essentially. But yeah, it's a lot more technical on court with the footwork.
So now this player that you're coaching, you've had them for a few weeks and they've got their footwork starting to move a little bit better with their footwork. What you're looking for now? You're looking at speed and agility. You're looking at any other key movements. So yeah, what's the next step?
I'm looking at strength in those tougher positions on the court. So what you'll find is people who can move okay will be able to cover the court around 2 or 3 steps around the center of the court. As soon as they get pushed out wide, they go flimsy. They lose their balance and they become completely off balance, and then they can't recover, for example, or even hit a good shot out there. So I'll always look at, can I push their movement and they are still looking like they're hitting the ball as if they were hitting it from the middle. So that's the dream, right? Is to be able to get a player to be able to hit a ball out in the wide positions on the court, the same quality as they would hit a shot in the middle of the court. So essentially you're just broadening the space that they can still move and stay on balance for and hit a good shot. That's like the next test for them.
And then again, are there any key drills that you look for in terms of those? Are you taking the ball away again and then looking at those movements again?
Yeah, you can take the ball away and do it. But good things for doing that are just freezing drills. So get a player to hit a wide forehand, for example, and then I'll get them to stop after their contact. Do they look strong? Are they on balance? Or have they fallen over their outside leg, for example? So freeze drills are really good for when players are pushed. But yeah, I can't think of other drills that I do at the moment off the top of my head.
And then at the start, you mentioned how important the mental side was there. So when you've got that beginner, how are you looking to develop that mental side of the game? Or is that down the line that you're looking for?
Do you mean mentally and like the physical side, like mentally physical, like being
like you
able
said,
to respond down?
yeah, like the mental side of, let's say they hit a bad shot, so then going again and trying to reset themselves like that sort of way.
Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. Well, I always try and stress to players that most of the errors or most of a point ending in tennis is due to an error. Whether it's a forced error where someone's hit a good shot and then they've missed, or whether there's an unforced error and they're in an easy position and they miss the ball. I would say nearly 90% of the points ending in tennis are errors. See, you kind of have to stress that to them. Just say to them, look, it's okay to miss. Missing is part of tennis. It's fine. But ideally, we miss fewer times as we get better, but it's okay to miss. And as soon as you say that, they're like, oh, actually, that's true. It's quite nice to miss. I always use it. It's not nice to miss, but it's okay when I miss. I always use the example of Federer, actually. Recently, he did that speech at Dartmouth, and then he was talking about how many points he actually won in his career. I think it was something like 54%. So in his total career, he actually only won pretty much half of the points that he played. So that's always a nice one to tell juniors, especially, to make them realize they don't need to win every point. You just need to become better at winning those important points to win a tennis match. So yeah, that's one of the areas I use to be able to improve people, mental side anyway. But mental side links to the physical side though as well, because if you've got a player who doesn't think that they can get a ball back, for example, and they always stop before the ball bounces twice. I actually had a few people recently like this where I've just pushed them that little bit more and said, look, don't stop running until that ball bounces twice. And then they get the ball back and then they realize, wow, like I can actually do this. So the sort of mental side is linking into the physical side of tennis, which is great. So all of those 4 performance factors I mentioned at the start do link with each other, which is great. And on that point, with the physical side, when I'm getting kids to move up.
So you mentioned you have a lot of different areas in your army around. You can provide technical support or tactical support or physical development support as well. So how does that benefit you as a coach in terms of providing bigger impact to your players' development, having those different angles of attack?
I feel like if you only focus on the technique or if you only focus on the physical side, then you're not going to develop a complete player. So you have to coincide both a couple of those factors each time you're working on something. So for example, I might be working on someone's forehand deep ball, for example. But if I don't tell them that you actually are in a defensive position here, you need to be more tactical here. You need to be thinking how to hit the ball a bit higher over the net to give you time to recover. Then I won't have improved as much if I only said, let's just work on your deep forehand. And this is how I need you to do it with your racket. You need to go low to high only, steeper racket path to get the ball to go deeper. If I didn't mention the tactical side, then they're going to struggle. I could probably mention all 4. I could be like, go back for your deep forehand. Tactically, I want you to try and hit the ball a little bit higher. Physically, I want you to really try and get onto your back leg and explode up off the ground. So use the ground. And mentally, I want you to really believe that you can do this shot. So like you can always link all 4 of those factors together, which is great. And I always try and do at least 2 when I'm explaining something. Another example is we're doing a slice backhand, which is quite a tough shot to teach some players. And I might be saying, all right, during the shot, can you just try and stay low? So just think about staying lower. So you stay down on the ball, but we are working still on cutting underneath the ball, for example. So it's super valuable to always link a few of the performance factors together.
And then I'm always trying to show with the coaches as well, having that, not just the physical or having another side to their coaching provides a bigger impact to their players and can put things into more context as well. For other tennis coaches, yeah, go on. Sorry.
So I was just saying that like, people learn in different ways as well. So it's very important to not just teach one dimensionally. You can't just, if someone's a visual learner, you've got to show them things. So if someone likes to listen, then you've got to tell them things. That you have to be able to be versatile as a coach to see what works for that person. It might be saying something in a different way. For example, like we're working from a physical point of view on staying low. And if I tell them that they're not an audio listener and I tell them just stay lower and they're not doing it, I might tell them like an analogy. Like imagine there's a ceiling above your head and if you bop up, you're going to hit your head on the ceiling.
Yeah, and the one around, you mentioned around staying low, I use, especially in deceleration where you're trying to focus on people to lower their center of mass. They always hold out a bar and they have to get under the bar, for example, using things like that where people can actually get a feeling as well of what that position will look like. So have you got any advice for other tennis coaches who may want to look to develop their physical development or their strength and conditioning or the physical side of their tennis coaching, and how they might add this into their technical coaching?
Yeah, the first thing I've done is I've been on many courses like CPD credits. So I've worked with I've been fortunate to work with some really good physical like tennis mentors. So I had a course with Matt Little, for example, and who's Andy Murray's fitness coach, and learned so much from him. And observing other coaches is also a massive thing that I would never be afraid of doing. Is don't think that because I'm looking at someone else and learning from them that it makes me a worse coach. Like it's the opposite. Like people who go out there and try and actually go and look for opportunities to develop themselves is brilliant because they'll improve most. But the LTA had a lot of resources as well. The Lord Tennis Association in the UK, they were really good for having documents about the physical side. And I tend to use equipment a lot as well. So even, for example, like working on low base, I might get them to sit on a chair, for example, just to get them to start from that lower position and then recover back to the chair. So using equipment is really good. And then just trial and error, like just try something out. Doesn't work for them, don't do it. Just try the next one. Yeah.
It's not being afraid to make mistakes as a coach, I think, as well, and put yourself out there and try new. Hi everyone, unfortunately we lost CJ's audio for the last part of the podcast, where CJ shares his details on how to get in touch with him. I'll put these in the show notes if you'd like to follow up with any questions for CJ or to visit any of his sites or social media. Thank you very much for listening or watching, and I hope you've had some great insights to add into your coaching and spark some thoughts to add into your own practice in whatever environment you're working in at the moment. I look forward to speaking to you soon on the next podcast.